Hey guys, how are you? Welcome to Atlanta. I am not at home in Atlanta. I'm on a layover. It's not a really long layover, and I'm gonna non-rev back here tomorrow after this trip ends tomorrow morning. So I'm not gonna make an effort and spend $30 Ubering back and forth to the apartment in Atlanta. So I'm hanging out here in the airport, the layover hotel. It's about 1 o'clock. My crew and I are going to meet at 6 o'clock for dinner, so I'm probably going to take a nap because I'm wiped out. But I wanted to film a little bit of questions and answers because I've got a lot of them from you guys. I'm really pleased. And so let's get started, shall we? All right, so the first question up here is, I should say, nothing I say, and I should say this more often, nothing I say is on behalf of my company or any other airline. It's all about my own experience and my life as a flight attendant. I'm not, I really don't want to be a spokesperson for my airline. And I'm sure they don't want me to be a spokesperson for their airline. So anything I say in terms of these questions especially is really just my own experience. And I would love to hear what your experience is like. There's a couple questions here that are they would be answered a very specific way for my airline, but for say Delta, American, United, and so on, you would have very, very different answers. So if you have very different answers to the questions I have here, I'd love to see some of your experiences. So feel free to drop a comment below. All right, so favorite layovers. What do I enjoy in each city? Wow, that's a long answer, but I'll try to keep it kind of short. My favorite layovers today are probably LA, Newark, Baltimore, Seattle. Those are my favorites. I don't get Boston often for some reason, but Boston would be in there too. And for the simple reason that it's super easy in those layovers for us to go into, we don't stay downtown anywhere. It's super easy to go from our airport into the heart of those cities. And those are some of my favorite cities in the country. For example, LA, there's Santa Monica, there's Venice Beach, Manhattan Beach, Seattle, there's all of downtown Seattle. Same thing with Portland. I just adore Portland. It's so charming, and there's great little shopping in Portland. There's a store, a little teeny store in Portland that caters to my community. And speaking of, it's still Pride Month, LGBTQ, gay, lesbian, all that. Look at the AFA pin. Our union made this little pin. Can you see that? I'm not sure if it's focusing on my camera. It's a little rainbow pride pin with AFA in there. But there's a little bathing suit and underwear shop, very specific, in Portland that I just love. And I go in there and I get the cutest bathing suits. I wear little bathing suits. Just to horrify people, I guess. But let's see. Newark I included because it's so easy for us to get. You just jump on the PATH train and you're in the middle of Manhattan. And so that's a lot of fun. I haven't had a layover in Myrtle Beach, which is killing me because our layover hotel is right on the boardwalk and I would love to go. But yeah, so my favorite layovers are ones that allow me direct access to the heart of really interesting cities. That's a pretty general answer, but that's that. How hard is it to transfer bases? When I was hired, I was told that we could not transfer while we were on probation. I want to cough, but I can't. I was told we couldn't transfer while on probation. Our probation period is 6 months. We're lucky. I hear some airlines like a year. But I do know for a fact that a few of my classmates transferred bases in the first few months, the first month or two. So I'm not sure how strict they are. Most of our bases are fairly open. None of our bases are closed because we're so full. Mostly because we're growing so rapidly. So if you're based in Las Vegas and you want to go to Detroit, Chicago, Fort Lauderdale, Dallas. I'm not sure about Atlantic City if that's open. It's a pretty senior base. But it's more than likely, if you don't have any disciplinary action against you, that you just apply to transfer. It's just a piece of paper or a form. You submit it to your supervisor, and it goes on from there. So it's fairly easy. And again, if you don't have any disciplinary action against you, and you're a member in good standing, and there's a base opening, you go. I do know that a few of my classmates who transferred early on transferred back, because you think you know what you're going to expect in that base, and when you finally get there, you're like, no thank you, and you run scurrying back. So some people, by base transfers, I didn't think about this, but it's true. Some people transfer bases depending on the season. I think you have to stick it out for 6 months at a time, but you know, people will transfer to Chicago during the warmer months and transfer to Vegas or Dallas or Fort Lauderdale during the colder months, because they just don't want to spend winter in those bases. So if you're senior enough and you know you can hold a line in any of our bases, I don't see why you can't be a snowbird, you know, and transfer to warmer or cooler climes as your tastes require. How do you drop or pick up trips? Now, this is one of those cases where it may be very, very different depending on the different airline. In my airline, we use Flicka, which is a website on our computer or our phone. And there's 2 pages that we would use. There's the drop board, and the open time board, and the trade board. Now, the open time board is where most of the trips that are dropped show up. So by dropping a trip, you'd see a trip that you don't want to take, or that you don't feel, you know, say you want to have more time off, you would want to drop a trip. If you saw someone is working that trip that you absolutely hate and don't want to work with them, you might want to drop that trip. So you go onto Flicka, you'd select that trip, go up there and click drop, and that trip, if crew scheduling approves you to drop that trip, that trip will drop off of your schedule and into an open time pot. That's how I believe it to happen. I've never dropped a trip. And then someone else will see that trip and pick it up. The possibility is that it does not fall off of your schedule until someone picks it up. I think that's actually how it works. So if someone else sees that trip as being available and they want that trip out of the open time pot, they would ask for that trip to pick it up. In our open time pot, it is based on seniority. So people with more seniority can take a trip from you. I have only successfully picked up 2 trips out of the open time pot. Usually, my employee number starts with a 771, and someone with a 6'3" or a 6'5" always seems to pick up my trips. So I pretty much stopped trying to pick up trips until I had more seniority. There is the trade board, and it's sort of a similar thing where you drop a trip into the trade board, and I believe it stays in your schedule until someone actually picks it up. But the trade board is first come, first serve. So if anyone sees that trip, no matter how junior or senior, whoever gets it first will get that trip. And it can't be taken away from them. We also have a Facebook page where for drops and trips and drops and swaps and pickups and all those things. So you can go onto that Facebook page and say, hey, does anyone have a 2-day? Or does anyone have a high credit 3-day? I'm legal, meaning I have had time off between the trips. I would love a trip. So if someone's about to drop something and they recognize someone who they like or whatever, they'll drop that trip to them and give it to them through Flicka. I hope this is making some sense. So the trade board is first come, first serve. The open time pot is based on seniority. but that's where you go to either pick up a trip or to drop a trip. I'm sure that's very, 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 very different for other airlines. So if you have a different experience or that your process is different, feel free to drop a comment below. I'd love to know. All right, pet peeves. That'll be a whole separate video. I have quite a few. I will tell you too, they have nothing to do with being a flight attendant. There's 2 pet peeves that I have that are deal breakers. If someone I'm on a date with does either of these things, I can't. I can't. Chewing with your mouth open, I can't handle it. There's something about it that ticks off something in my brain that I just like can't handle. Chewing with your mouth open, deal breaker. I can't do it. And then scuffing your feet when you walk. Can't handle it. Those are 2 noises that I cannot handle. And I honestly always think, how hard is it to pick up your feet when you walk? If you can't even pick up your feet when you're walking, what else are you letting go? You know, whatever. Do I sound petty? Sorry. Dream adventure. I had never thought of this. Dream adventure. Well, my dream adventure would probably have to do with a cruise ship. I would love to cruise around the world. Or, you know, even just something as simple as an inter-ocean I'd like to cross the ocean on a cruise ship. I'd also like to see, Europe and Asia. I'd like to cruise around Australia, New Zealand. I want to cruise around the world. I love being on a cruise ship. A cruise is my happy place. My particular favorite cruise line is Celebrity. I will admit it's the only cruise line I've ever been on. I've been on 3 cruises, and they're just amazing. So I would love to go on a worldwide cruise or around the world cruise. We get discounts that are beyond significant when it comes to cruises, but it's typically like Carnival, and I've never been on a Carnival cruise. I hear the videos I see on YouTube of Carnival cruises are always just a little too loud. There's a little too much music, a little too many neon lights, and I like a nice, quiet, sedate cruise with older people. So, oh, it's raining. So that's my dream adventure, is to go on a cruise around the world. Can I afford it? No. What is a stress? I'm so sorry, my shirt is, well, I'm shedding all over my black shirt. What is a stressful flight and what is a pretty good flight? Someone wrote that to me because you frequently hear people say, oh my God, that trip was so stressful. I'm so done. I'm so over it. Or it was a really great flight, but no one ever talks about why they were either. So there can be lots of reasons that a flight could be stressful. For me, the #1 reason a flight is stressful, it's when you don't have a great crew, or there's not a lot of great communication, or a crew that really works well together. Whether it's 1 or 2 people who are really at odds with the other members of the crew, that is usually the greatest source of stress for me. Anytime a trip has been miserable, it's almost always because I didn't like the crew I worked with, or didn't work well with them. And I work well with most people, but this month, the line I held this month was with 2 people, one of which I like a lot when he's by himself. When he's with this other person that was on the crew with me this month, who I really dislike entirely, he changed entirely and transformed, and it was very awkward. This last trip I had was with them, was awful. Both of them, I'm powerful, both of them dropped this trip that I'm on right now. Whether or not it was because they didn't like me or work well with me, it's up to them. But they both dropped this trip, which is great because I'm working with an amazing crew. One person is reserved and another person is senior to be by like 9 years. So we're having a nice time. If it's not because of crew, a flight could be stressful because, well, there's a general population. Sometimes, Like, I'm from Boston, all right? So if you're from Boston, I don't want to offend you, but you won't be surprised by this. But there's a very particular type of person from Boston who vacations in Las Vegas. There's a very particular type of person who goes to Las Vegas from Boston. And like, you know, people from Southie who go to Vegas for fun. There's a group, and they like to party, they like to have fun, they're typically on the louder side, and it's very active. And if you don't identify with that and you aren't familiar with it, it can be like herding cats. And if they don't feel that you respect them, it's game over, and it's a very awkward flight. Same thing with Atlanta. Sometimes you'll find a very particular group of passengers who want to act up and party and have a great time, because we're that kind of airline sometimes. And when you kind of, if they don't feel respected and you don't treat them with the respect that they deserve, by the way, things can get out of hand, and it's a stressful flight. I don't find flights with medical emergencies stressful. I think that might sound weird, but the scope of my training and the scope of my training that I am allowed to take part in and do is so narrow that anything that falls outside of that scope is not within my hands. So I can't really be stressed about it. There's only so few things I'm allowed to do, number one, that medical emergencies I find fairly easy. They're very simple. They're black and white. There are things you do and there are things you don't do during a medical emergency. So I don't find those things stressful at all. And if people on board get a little sick or a little nauseous, I find myself so lost in taking care of them and making sure that they feel better that I'm not stressed at all during that flight. What makes a great flight? Well, number one, a great relationship with your crew members is crucial, especially if you have a lead who has a very positive, encouraging tone, because they're friendly to all of our guests as they board, so everyone comes on board with a very positive attitude, and it really lasts the remainder of the trip. Anytime, you know, when I'm moving through the cabin, if I just make eye contact with you, I'm probably going to say something nice to you. Hey, how are you? Welcome aboard. You know, say something sweet. And so that makes it a nice experience as I move through the cabin, have pleasant conversations. So the days I have really great flights is because there was a lot of great interaction with either my crew or our guests, our passengers. Most flights are pleasant. This trip has been wonderful. Wonderful. The children have all behaved beautifully. We haven't had so much as a crushed goldfish cracker. I mean, they have all, because some days you come on those planes, especially from Orlando, that plane is just covered in cookie crumbs. The flights we've had this trip have all been so pleasant. The guests have all been so wonderful. The crew we have is wonderful, and our flight crew have all been very pleasant and a lot of fun. So it's all about communication. I think that's what makes for a really great trip. Let's see. Will not having a driver's license hinder the chances of becoming a flight attendant? I don't know the right answer to this one. I'm gonna say that I would imagine that as long as you had a state-issued ID, that you'd be okay. You certainly, of course, have to have a passport, birth certificate, and all those things. But a driver's license, I can't imagine would be required. When we go through KCM, or known crew member, to get through our path of security, all we have to do is show our KCM card. We scan it. We show them our work badge, and we have to show them an ID that is a legal ID. Many people use their passport. Some people, I use my license. When I'm on a trip, I keep my license in my bag, with my badge and my KCM badge in my lanyard. So my license, my KCM badge, and my work badge are all right here. but some people use their passport. So if you don't have a driver's license, you could use your passport as a form of ID anywhere in this country. So I can't imagine an airline would require a driver's license. If your airline requires a driver's license, please do us all a favor and make a comment below. So don't let not having a driver's license stop you from getting these wings. Most interesting passenger, that's probably going to be another video. Most difficult situation is probably the most interesting passenger. That'll be another video. Let's see. The question. Did I apply to other airlines before mine? What was the outcome? Yes, I did apply to other airlines before I applied to my airline. I applied to Delta first and instantly got a video interview invitation. I had not prepared at all. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in a rotten location to take the video interview. My laptop camera was crappy. I was not dressed appropriately. I bombed it. I did not prepare. And I got a thank you, but no thank you from Delta. I did apply for JetBlue. I got a thank you, but no thank you. I applied for American. I did not hear from them because American seems to take a very long time. I did get an invitation to a face-to-face interview with American long after I actually finished my training with my airline. I applied to my airline. And who else did I apply to? Did I apply to Southwest? I don't think I applied to Southwest, which I find kind of funny. But I applied to other airlines. I work, as you probably know, for an ultra low cost carrier. I don't think anybody who doesn't know how much I love my job, I don't think anyone really approaches an ultra low cost carrier as their first option. Most flight attendants, most people who want to be a flight attendant, they want to work for a legacy airline with glamour and drama and all that. And fancy purple uniforms and, you know, all that. So, you know, my airline was not my first choice. It was down deep in my choices. But I've already told you how much I love my job a number of times, right? Now that I know what it's like to be a flight attendant, and I have a good grasp on what it's like to be a flight attendant with other airlines, I wouldn't work for any other airline. Unless I had to, you know. If someone offered me a fantastic position and I had an option to get a line right away and all these magic things lined up, maybe. But I am quite content, very happy with who I work for. So I feel lucky in that I didn't get the job with other airlines and I ended up in the airline that was perfect for me. And I think I have a video, I think it's called, you know, I do have a video. I think it's titled Stepping Stone to a Larger Airline. And I go in at length as to why working for my airline or another airline in the same genre is ideal for some people. A regional airline is ideal for some people. Not for me, because I like my layovers and I like our aircraft. But you know, if you like smaller aircraft, smaller crews, you want to be home most nights or more regularly, a regional airline might be perfect for you, where Delta might just demand too much of your time away from family and stuff. So yeah, so I applied to other airlines first. I just happened to get lucky and not get hired by them. So that's how it worked out. Do I work with the same flight attendants or with new flight attendants each flight? So when you get a line, when you get a schedule for the month, you are scheduled to work with the same base crew for the whole trip, the whole month. So for example, this month I was scheduled to work with a guy and a girl and myself, and we would be the three main crew members for any pairing. So on a 319, on an A319, there's only 3 flight attendants. It would be us. On a 320, there would be the 3 of us plus 1 other chaser who might join us for the entire day or a multiple day of legs, or they only may fly with us 1 leg and then continue on to another flight. And someone else may join us for the remainder of the day. On an A321, we would have 2, because we have 5 flight attendants, we would have 2 chasers, and again, they might join us for 1 single leg of a trip. They might join us for a complete day. They might join us for the whole trip. So, you'll work with, in my airline, I'll work with 2 other people for the whole month, and then there'll be chasers who will join us to complete our minimum crew for different variants of different airlines, different aircraft. Now, having said that, because I answered a question about dropping trips and picking up trips earlier, for example, this crew I worked with this month, one person and I did not get along at all. It actually got kind of not. We didn't argue, but we were very butting heads the last day of the last trip, and she dropped this trip before it began. The other member of my crew, who I really genuinely like, but when he's with this other person, they team up into this very strange dynamic, and it was very awkward. It was very awkward. And so he dropped this trip. So someone else picked up this trip, and another reserve was called for the trip. So I'm working with 2 people I've never worked with before, but we just happen to really work well together, so it's been a lot of fun. So for the most part, you're going to work with a base of people, like a crew, a base crew, and then depending on your airline, you may have other people join you and leave you during the course of the month in every pairing. Does that make sense? All right. Am I going to answer one more question? Oh. This is on that same line. This is the same person who asked that question. Have you ever had a flight attendant express they didn't care for you or your personality? Yes. So if you go back and watch my first video, I think it's about crash pads. If you go back and watch my first video, I'm very I'm a little bit more calm. In person, I do tend to be a little bit more animated. I don't stop talking. I have what I call enthusiasm. Other people don't see it in as positive a light as I do. And I know for a fact, and I always blame it on being an Aries. I know that I grate against some people's nerves because I'm not quiet, I'm not subtle at all. And some people are irritated by me, and it used to really bother me. It bothered me this month, that one coworker. But you know, the older I get, the less I care if someone doesn't like me. And as a flight attendant, we tend not to work with the same people again and again and again. In my base, as small as an airline we are, we have about 650 people in my base. The odds of me working with someone who does not like me very often is pretty slim. So if they don't like me, tough. I'm not going to change who I am because a flight attendant doesn't like me. I'm also not going to be too wounded. I was this past month a little bit. It bothered me, mostly because I really liked one of the guys that I flew with, and how he behaved around the other person kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah, so it has happened that people have not liked me, and that is fine. Fine. Let's see. Am I going to answer anything else? All right. The same person clearly asked this question too. Did I scale back on my personality for the interview process? No. I did tailor myself and what I said and how I presented myself to a flight attendant interview. But why I get jobs is typically because I have a personality, that I project well, and I'm typically likable and knowledgeable. So for my interview, I definitely think my personality was a perfect fit for a flight attendant interview, and that I was confident, my voice carries, I'm typically well-spoken, my vocabulary is nice and rounded. So did I scale back on my personality? No. I did tailor what I said and how I spoke to the flight attendant interview. For example, when we were in line to enter into the orientation, I spoke to the people on either side of me, but I also kind of leaned forward and I spoke to the people on the side of them. Hey guys, you know, and I brought people into a conversation, and that's my personality style. And I didn't change that for my interview. If anything, I expanded how I behave in public, and was a little bit more visible, to the point where our HR person, 10 months after my interview, I ran into her on an airplane, and she said, "Oh, I remember you. You wore a navy suit, navy pinstripe suit, a white shirt, and a red tie." She remembered me out of 500 people from 10 months before. So did I scale back my personality? No. Will I ever scale back on my personality? Yeah, sometimes. If I see him making someone visibly uncomfortable. I will tell you, I did scale back my personality at work this week. We had this couple come on board. It was a guy and a girl, a man and a woman. They were holding hands the entire time, which was lovely. It was very sweet. She had, I don't remember what her t-shirt said, but it had some big dramatic religious thing on the front of it, I forget. And then his t-shirt said, "Real men love Jesus." Not that religious people can't or are unwilling to embrace people of my gayness. It's not like they're unwilling or unable to, but there's certain signs, like this giant t-shirt, "Real Men Love Jesus," that made me kind of tone my voice down a little bit, because I didn't want to make them uncomfortable. Because I can be quite animated and not flamboyant, but sometimes a little bit more, I'm easy with my sexuality, not in terms of sexuality, but that I am as gay as I am. And it sometimes makes very, very, very conservative people a little uncomfortable. And when my job is to serve them, my job is to serve. I am a servant to my guests. I don't want them uncomfortable in any reason, for any reason. If I were in the grocery store, not wearing my uniform, and I saw that same t-shirt, would I tone myself down? If I were eating at a restaurant next to them, and I saw that t-shirt, would I tone myself down? Not at all. Would I amplify that behavior? No, because I'm a middle-aged man. In my 20s, would I have been amplified? Yes, I would have been a mess. No, so I have not toned down my personality for my interview, and I typically don't scale down my personality at work, because it really works with my style of being a flight attendant. But there are times I do tone down or edit what I say around particular people when I sense that I might make them uncomfortable. There's an answer. All right, so I have been talking at length, far too long. I'm going to go take a shower, get out of the rest of my uniform, and then take a nap before dinner. Okay? So if you have any questions or any comments or any examples, any answers, your own answers to those same questions that might be very different than my answers, feel free to leave them below. That would be really interesting, I think, for myself and for other people. Feel free to subscribe. Those numbers are, it's magical to me that, and weird that so many people do listen to what I say, and I love seeing that subscription number rise. It does give me energy when I film a video, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I will, lastly, if you're still watching, email address. I know I mentioned it in my last video. But there's an email address I'd really prefer you guys using rather than reaching out to me on Facebook. So if you have a question or want to make a comment, feel free to write me an email at my full name, Stephen.Pereira. You can look at my screen name there and see how it's spelled, at gmail.com. Okay, so Stephen.Pereira@gmail.com. And that'll be an easier way for me to interact with you guys rather than have to go through my Facebook Messenger, because that thing is becoming a mess. All right, so thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Fly safe, okay?